Hi, everybody. Hi, thanks so much for being here. I'm Lori Nichols. I'm the Assistant Dean of Graduate Affairs. And we have a really great set of panelists today, most of whom you already know. In today's Ask Me Anything, Careers in Advertising, Professor Gould, Professor Greenberg, Professor Sullivan will be giving you all the advice that they have in their head for you as you embark on your career. I do have a few questions to get us started, but we want to hear from you guys. Okay, we want to make sure you get all your questions answered. But first, we can go down the row. Start with Michelle, with Professor Sullivan, to do introductions, sort of a little bit of your professional and background.
Sure. Hi, everybody. Welcome. So great to see you. I'm Michelle Sullivan, professor of the practice in advertising. I'm also the Associate Dean of Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion for COM. I have been here 5 years teaching, returning from being a COM graduate, first generation college student in 1995. So for me, it was a bit like coming home. I spent the time after COM working in the agency world for 5 years. I worked on Starbucks and Legal Seafoods back in the time period when Starbucks was launching in the East. So it was a really cool brand to work on back then. And then I spent 17 years on the client side. So what I bring to the team in the ad program is sort of that client perspective, because I was working as the client for 17 years at the Boston Beer Company. And I worked on brands like Sam Adams and helped with the craft beer revolution that has taken full hold in America. And I also launched 2 brands there, Twisted Tea and Truly. So it's great to see all of you. And we're looking forward to the conversation.
Awesome. Hi, everyone. I see a lot of my students. Hi, guys. I'm Professor Janna Greenberg. This is my 2nd year at BU as professor of the practice. Before that, I was teaching marketing at Brandeis. But my entire professional career, other than like shortly after my MBA, has been in an advertising agency. I started my career in Silicon Valley on the digital side and worked alongside creative, coming up with a lot of the advertising formats that we know and sort of love to hate today. I worked on Sprint predominantly and a lot of other small tech brands when I lived in Silicon Valley. And then I moved to Boston, where I then forayed into media, and I spent 7 years at the Boston Media working on brands like TracFone, Fidelity, all kinds of business development, right? Really focusing on growing the agency through business development. And then I really took up teaching and started teaching at Brandeis and came to BU, professor of practice. That's my career in a nutshell.
We stole her. We were part of the committee.
They were. It's pretty amazing.
We know talent. We see it.
That's right. Yeah. Plus, Janna has a very strong media background too, which is like not only was she the top candidate in the group we were interviewing, so that we have to say that first. But the bonus for her was she had an area of strength that we on the faculty didn't necessarily have and felt we needed on the full-time faculty to be stronger at. I don't want to say faculty period, because we have adjunct faculty that do a lot of great stuff. So yeah, my name is Doug Gould. I'm a professor at the practice. I've been here for 5 years. I worked 34 years agency side. So you're in the College of Communication, unless you're a strategist, not very good at math. And so most of you can't figure out how old I am, but it'd be nice if you say I don't look as old as you just figured out I was at some point. So I'm an art director by trade. I have a Bachelor of Fine Arts in Visual Design. There were no ad schools when I went to college, of which there are tons now. And I spent the first 10 years of my career mucking around at agencies that most of you would not know. And I think that's important because I didn't start at the top. I started at the very bottom in what's called recruitment advertising, which is basically help wanted advertising. But over the years, I kept my eyes on sort of moving up. I wound up at Bill Holiday in 1995, where I stayed for almost 16 years. And I worked on brands like CVS Pharmacy, Dunkin' Donuts, Auto Nation, Anheuser-Busch, I ran the John Hancock Insurance business. I ran the CVS Pharmacy business. I worked on a number of healthcare accounts, but everything from consumer to business. If you read the profiles, anytime someone writes about me, they'll tell you that I've done 2 Super Bowl commercials. It's true. I have won the USA Today ad meter. It's true. So when you watch the Super Bowl and say which commercial came in first, my partner and I have made that one. And I also have one commercial that has been named to Ad Age's top 5 in the 50-year history of Super Bowl advertising. So those are the big calling cards. But beyond those 2 spots, I've made hundreds and hundreds of commercials, many that you've never heard of, and many that I wouldn't even want to look at. But after at the end of my advertising career, I actually spent about 4 years in-house. That was part of the 34 years. Don't make me older than that. I spent some time in some in-house agencies, which gave me a good frame of reference for when you ask the question that inevitably somebody asks, which is, what do you think of the difference between agency and in-house? That gives me a good idea. So anyway, that's the quick brush. I also have a 7-month-old grandchild, which is really cute. So he's my first.
Perhaps questions?
Yeah.
Great. So I have a very specific question for Professor Greenberg. Since you got an MBA degree and also working around Silicon Valley, that area, so I'm just wondering, how's your MBA degree help and how did you find a job in that area, which is very far away from our East Coast?
I think it really, so the address your question, yeah, I'm gonna repeat the question. So the question is, sorry, what's your name? So she noticed that I have an MBA, and so I'll address that one first, and then we could talk about the geography first. So I think that the MBA is actually exceptionally useful for the world of advertising. Why is it useful? It's useful because it gives you a framework-oriented mindset, right? I tend to look for patterns and things, and so it helps analyze brands, it helps give context, it makes me a much more organized, structured thinker on my team, so that the teams that I have ever worked on, they're much more organized and they're able to get things done and they're more insightful. And the MBA just really helps me stay thoughtful and helps me be a deeper thinker. That's all it is. It gives me frameworks, right? Is it necessary for success in advertising? Absolutely not, but it really helps, especially if you are working in account management, right? Because then you can have a lot of empathy and understanding of your client because you speak the same language and you look at the world in the same way.
Yeah, I mean, I would add on to that. I think that if your goal, and many of you are long-range young people, right? I've met many students here who already know what they want to do. But if your goal is to one day be a partner in an agency or to be a chief operating officer, an MBA will be significantly beneficial, not necessarily to make you better 25 years down the road, but there are people who still measure people by paper. And that's just a fact.
So I would just add to that, working on the in-house side, so I transitioned out of agency and I took a role as a brand manager at a beer company. And I found that all my peers actually had business school degrees. So for me, they actually sent me to get an executive MBA as I started moving up in the organization. So if you haven't gone down that route yet, you might want to think about getting into a company or a large agency that would actually pay for that for you. That was the difference between agency and corporate. That was a blessing for me. I don't think I would have paid for it on my own. So the fact that they actually pushed me to get one. But the reason was what Doug just said. They were evaluating me on paper, and as I was becoming the boss of people who had MBAs, and many of them had Ivy League MBAs. I had my bachelor's from Com, and they felt that I needed some business school pedigree to actually speak their language. I sort of thought, well, I'm moving up and doing a better job managing these brands because I don't think like you.
Right.
I come at it from this intuitive, emotional high EQ ability to connect with consumers and know what's going to build brands and find the intersection of what consumers are really looking for. But they really felt like, but you need the degree anyway. Even though you have the results, you still need the degree. So I found it very helpful to sit at the table with other people, who were my peers, the CEO, the CFO, who had that degree, and it helped bring a level of credibility to those conversations when you're looking particularly at analytics and results and pricing strategy. P&L was really helpful for me.
Yeah, and that's true. So the short answer is, when is the right time for you to do it if you want to do it, right? You can go, I think, Janna, you were right after undergrad?
Yeah.
So,
A year and a half.
and Michelle came later, and I don't have one at all.
Right.
Right, so, but I'm a creative, right? So this is why it's good to have a creative in the room. An MBA is not going to do any good as a creative. The thing that does you the most good as a creative is being the hell of a creative. That's it. People only care about your book and your ability to sell smart stuff. That's all they care about, and what you did this week.
Yeah.
Not last week.
For Professor Gould, I was just wondering, as a creative, how do you continue to teach yourself to be creative? You have a lot of different clients, and as I learned in class with Professor Greenberg, you only have an allocated time to try to push out your work, so you don't want to mess up. But how do you challenge yourself at a personal level that doesn't affect your client?
In terms of deadlines,
Well, not in terms of deadlines, just like, how do you continue to be creative and challenge your own creativity? Like, what do you do? Like, how do you practice creativity?
okay. Yeah, I get it. So, all right, so this will be a little bit winding, I think, because there's more than one answer to your question. Because when you say, how do I keep myself creative, or one is, you have to love what you do. I tell students all the time, unfortunately, if you wind up taking my classes in my office hours, you're going to hear this phrase a lot. What's my opportunity and who's my boss are the two most important things in your job. One of the best ways to remain engaged and happy about the creative process is to have great opportunity to be working on clients who excite you, right? That's going to be different for all of you. And to have a boss who cares about you. As soon as you don't have those two things, you're like a flower without sunlight or water, and you can wither despite the circumstance. So those two things are important first. You have to want it inside of yourself. Creativity is challenging because 90% of what we hear is negative, is negative feedback. So is that Jacqueline? Is it Jacqueline back there? No, you look like Jacqueline. Sorry. All right, but Savannah is in my class, and like, she sits in my class and puts up a project, and I'm going to say, okay, this is kind of interesting. This is kind of interesting, and then I'm going to spend the next 15 minutes telling her what's different. That's not different from the life that you will live in an agency. When I present great work to a client, even if they love what they see, they're going to say, but, and the thing that comes after but is about 5 times longer than what came before it. So if you really love what you do and you're in a good situation, it's easy to stay motivated. Now, the second part of my winding answer will be more about the process itself. You've probably heard that agencies work challenging hours, that the weeks can be long, and that's true. But I like to back that up with, like, tell me anybody who works that doesn't have that situation. I don't know anybody who gets a degree, goes on to a challenging job where they get paid good money and they don't work a ton of hours. So agencies work hard hours, but what I did was I managed within my lifestyle. I had 2 young children when I arrived at Hill Holiday, and I wanted to do great work, but I also wanted to not be an absentee father. So what I did was I came into work early in the morning. So rather than arrive at 9 or 9:30 and stay till 7:30 or 8 like everybody else, my partner and I were at work 7:30 every morning. When we were really busy, we were at work at 5:30 in the morning. So we could go home at 5:30 in the afternoon. So the way I stay engaged and creative is by knowing when I'm successful at working and not letting the corporation decide my function. Right? So that's important for everybody too, because if your best time to be creative is 9 o'clock at night, you should be the night worker. But if you're like me and you do your best work early in the morning, you want to make sure that your company knows that that's your work style. This is when you're at your best. So that's the second piece. And then the third piece is knowing where you can work. So I would have places where I functioned very well when I was thinking, and I would have places where I did not function well. And I made sure that I put myself in those places. I'm not kidding you, like it's a very insecure business. When I got moved from my office once in the tower to another office, I was afraid that I wasn't going to be able to think in the new office, because I had done amazing work in these four walls. And I was freaked out that down the hall and around the corner, I was not going to be able to think. So the last piece I'll tell you, and I give this advice in my office hours all the time. As a creative or as anybody, you all know what imposter syndrome is, right? You've all heard about that. I didn't know what that was, but I lived with it most of my life. You have two balloons. Okay, your driven balloon. I am driven to be great creatively. In my case, your case might be different. And then you have the anxiety balloon. I am a failure. I don't belong here. I suck. This balloon actually helps this balloon unless it gets too big. Then it swallows this balloon. So when you feel this one getting too big, you have to work past it and not let it collapse you. And that is a challenge that I dealt with most of my life, and I still deal with today. So it was a short question. I'm sorry for the long answer.
So I am a film TV major, and I have taken several advertising classes for now. And for the job seeking process, I'm actually trying to explore still like accounts or like strategy in advertising. So in this case, my like disadvantage is that I'm a film TV major that has like no large relevance in the advertising field. And also I am an international student, and also like pushing me like backwards. So I'm just trying to ask if do the professors have any advices in terms of like how to take my disadvantage into like an advantage.
So to point of clarification, because I think I heard all of us could touch it.
Yeah.
Did you say that, so you're a film and TV major now, but you're taking advertising, are you leaning towards moving in that direction?
Yes.
Okay, and how far through your grad or undergrad career are you?
Oh, I'm undergrad.
Undergrad senior. Okay, all right, you want to go first?
Sure. I think it's very relevant, right? I think you can use it as a point of differentiation because we're doing the same things, right? Advertising, professionals or majors or storytelling, right? And we're trying to connect. We're trying to figure out what key message do I want to convey and what key message does the person that I want to connect with want to hear, right? So the storytelling capability is exactly the same. And I think when we're looking at candidates on the hiring side, we're looking for people who have different experiences. So I would say, think about yourself as a brand, right? And positioning yourself as a brand. You have a lot of the same skills as people who've been ad majors, plus, right? You know, plus think about where that storytelling and that film capability actually, you know, becomes part of your brand. I have the skills because I've taken, you know, these other classes, and I have different skills that ad majors don't necessarily have. So I wouldn't worry as much about what classes you've taken or, you know, what skills you have acquired, because candidly, we kind of view entry-level folks coming into an agency or into the corporate world as being green, right? We're looking more for potential capabilities, maybe some more of the softer skills, right? Than necessarily checking off a box of what courses you've taken or what internships you've taken. So I would also play up your softer skills, right? And any leadership opportunities, you know, people are looking for those, whether you've been engaged in, you know, outside activities and not just sitting behind a screen and not just reading a lot of books, but anything you've done to volunteer, you know, anything that's mission oriented, led a club, you know, things that you've done that again, differentiate your brand and make your brand stand out.
And if I can build on that, I think that any job search should have like multiple prongs that you're pursuing, right? The ideal one is that your film and TV background lands you in a creative role in the agency of your choice, and you're like, yes, I did it. But that should be one of the many paths that you're pursuing as part of your agency approach job search. And one option is just to get a job in any opening that would be okay for you to prove yourself, including answering phones. I have seen over and over again at the junior level, people that sit at the front desk of an agency, get in there, and then they make friends with people in different departments. And because departments grow and they want to prove an entity, if you have the background and you went to comm and you have film TV in your background, all you have to do is raise your hand and prove yourself, and your trajectory is set. So I think the most important thing you can do at the entry level is get your foot in the door and pursue that. And even if that means starting out in a position that maybe isn't like great for your ego initially, it's worth doing, because I can give you an example from Havas. The person that answered the phones for a year now runs marketing communications. She's a VP at Havas, right? She also is a comm graduate. So, and she's one of like 10 stories I can name for you that work their way up through an agency to a really senior role.
Can I ask, when you talk about moving into advertising, do you know what area of interest is most interesting to you now, if you were to do it?
Oh, as for now, I'm taking DM417, like the creative.
Fundamentals, yeah.
Yes, but I also want to explore other fields like strategy.
Okay, so I would add on, I don't think film and TV is a weakness for you. You know, we have, for instance, we have a lot of creative strategists who take creative courses. And what I tell them when they're applying to a strategy job is your skill as a creative is actually benefit, because you understand another end of the business. So as a film and TV major, you understand production. You can add value to any agency that you walk into. And a lot of agencies, smaller agencies, are looking for production skills too. So don't necessarily, you can even use that skill to get yourself into an agency and then make your way into the role of your choice, to Janna's point, even if it's through, you know, the creative environment. You said you're a senior? Like, what year are you in?
Oh, I am completing a junior, but I'm graduating.
Early. This December, this
Oh,
December?
No, that's not.
Next summer. So you still have a chance to take portfolio development.
Yeah, so I'm trying to take ASVAB next semester, and also I'm trying to take the strategy.
Okay, yeah, so those are going to be valuable to you, and I can tell you that if you wound up in any of the, you know, Janna's class, Michelle's class, Lisa Borden teaches strategy. Even one semester of a strategy class can, with all of the other well-rounded aspects of your education, can put you in a good position. I mean, I've taught, it's not ideal, but I've taught creative students one semester of portfolio development who've gone on to get agency jobs after just 13 weeks. I don't recommend it, but it does happen, because sometimes people find themselves later in their undergraduate career. And that's okay. You know, Vera Wang designed her first dress at like 40.
We just released some more seats for AdLab. We added 20 seats. So if you jump on, there might be some spots available. We'll go to you. So 1, 2, 3, 4. Oh, gosh. Okay. We'll start with you. Sorry. Yeah.
Hi,
future grad student studying advertising. So with Professor Greenberg, we're little like research agencies that had to present it. I was presenting private identity. I was so interested by it, I just wanted to know, does your work shift and does the quality of your work shift or like differ in any way in terms of what agency or like you're working at currently? Like, does the value and the direction the agency is like hinder your workspace?
Hell yeah. Yes, absolutely. I'm gonna let you take it, but yes.
So I wasn't sure, is the question, so at does the agency set the
Yeah,
parameters
the
for the
culture,
The
right?
culture of the agency set for the quality of your work?
Yeah, it's the
Yeah.
output that you have as an individual, that is like different.
Yes, a resounding hell yes. Absolutely, and I think we may have talked about this in class. There is this weight I see in office hours between the idea of going to an agency where you know they're going to push you really hard, the Glassdoor reviews say, oh my God, people work really long hours. The culture may not be great, but the work is amazing and is wonderful. I am a big proponent of starting your career in sort of the biggest bet you can possibly land at, even if it means really a rough roller coaster in terms of your work-life balance. And the reason for that is that long hours don't matter if you like the people you work with and you love what you're working on and you're pushing yourself.
And you're young and unattached.
Right, and young and on the tip, right,
Right.
later on, there are so many consequences for not being available, but when you're just starting out, it's just you and the work and you can immerse yourself in it and beautiful, like my biggest problem with advertising has always been that I don't have enough time in the day to give it the time that I would want. I could do it 24/7 and there's like people that need me to do other things, right? So that's my biggest problem with it, but when you're young, push yourself to do it. And yes, like when I was at AKQA is known for award-winning work, and any agency that's known for award-winning work means very concrete things. It means the hours are long, lots of chaos, because award-winning work means you've never done it before, so you're flailing like, what are we doing? But the level of the talent in that agency is so high that everyone has to perform at their very best, and the best of my work came from that even short period. But I was barely home, so you know, it is what it is. So that's my answer to you. Yes, the agency totally aligns with the quality of the work you produce.
Yeah, I don't disagree with that take, that working in big agencies and surrounding yourself with some of the smartest people is a good way to go. But I'll go back to the point that I made earlier. If you get a job at BBDO in New York, right out of school, on the shittiest account with the shittiest boss, you are gonna hate it. So it is not about the tag on your shirt or the tag on your jeans. The agency name only matters if the opportunity and the person who's looking out for you will help you get where you need to go. If you get dropped in the water and no one helps you and you don't have the skill set to succeed in that particular environment, it's not going to be a good situation. So remember that when you interview for a job, they're not just interviewing you. You are interviewing them. So if you go through a gauntlet of 5 or 6 people in a series of interviews, when they get ready to hire you, ask this question: who is my boss going to be? And then when you know that, you ask that person, what is your management style? How do you help young people like me, fresh out of school, do the work that you want and help the team, but at the same time, make sure that I'm properly supported if I need help? And the answer to that question is usually pretty telling.
If you think about it, when you're choosing where you're gonna go as an undergrad or a grad student, those decisions have big impacts, right? Do you want the urban environment, the small school, the big school? You know, choosing the agency is very much like that. There's no right or wrong answers. You know, it's finding the right place for you. Some people will thrive and grow much more in a small environment with a great boss. Some people can go on to those, you know, marquee Fortune 500 accounts in a big agency and thrive and grow with the right boss. I don't think there's any right or wrong starting point.
Yeah.
You know, I think it's very much what's right for you. And finding that mentor, you know, we all say the same thing in every class. People ask this question in every class we teach every semester, grad, undergrad, about the sort of like, how do I know which agency to target? And we have the big Wyden Kennedys, the best on the planet, right, for decades, the brand names. But I would say that doesn't matter as much as who your boss would be at Wyden Kennedy, right? Or you might be working in an agency here in Boston, perhaps, where, you know, people living on the West Coast haven't even heard of them. But that could be the best place for your starting career, depending on the clients you'd be working on, the colleagues you'd be working with, and the mentors you'd have there. As a client, you know, some of the best work I got was from small agencies that were well known here in the Northeast, but probably not on the other coast. And we worked with some very big agencies that gave us campaigns that didn't work. You know, we considered them failures. So it really, there is no one size fit all, right? It's all a moment in time based on kind of the mix of the team, right?
Right.
Yeah, and if I can build on that, I mean, I think one of the decisions that you have to really weigh is how small or large you want the agency, because in that one decision are so many other decisions. And so large agencies, and I take White and Kennedy out of it, like that is an example of how hard you want to push yourself to like really get a level of certain exposure for certain work. That's a whole other conversation. But let's say you have a well-recognized brand name versus a small agency. In a small agency, you're going to get to do multiple roles, and you're going to get to cross the line and get a ton of experience. And no one's going to slap your hand for like being like,
Right.
hey, I'm really interested in analytics. What does this do? Or
Right.
where's the UX guy? What
Right.
did they do? Oh, I want to go do that. Right? You get to really, if you're a self-starter, you're going to just explore to no end. In a large agency, people are very much about their skills, right? Like
Yep.
you're working in strategy, don't you dare tell creative what to do, right? Or, you know, you might not even be invited to the creative brainstorm because the creatives do their thing in a large agency and strategists do that. There's a process, there's a structure, and there's no lane crossing. And that's hard for learning. But then if you like structure and you like swim lanes, you're gonna love that versus a small agency where everyone's crossing over each other all the time. So fundamentally, the big decision is how small or large.
I would also agree with what you said on the balance question. And I think if you ask Doug, like he would say the same thing. I won't speak for him because he's here, he'll tell us himself. But that balance in the first several years of your career, I would say, you know, is probably something that you're not going to find, and find the ability to move up, be successful, make more money, work on the great brands, right? People will say things like, oh, you can have it all. That's not really true, right? It's not really true. You're not going to have it all. You're not going to be put on the best accounts and get promoted and keep getting promoted and work on sexy brands and win awards and have your work-life balance in the early stages of your career. But you do want to put yourself in a position where you can then be done, right? And come in at 5:30 in the morning and not have a boss who dictates you need to be here because they trust in his work, right? They trust that you're going to get the work done. So you can begin to steer your own ship more after you prove yourself. You know, you really have to kind of prove yourself. And I know that we're all thinking more about, you know, emotional well-being and health and wellness and balance and self-care. And that is so critical. But if you're going to prioritize that, you know, getting the sexiest opportunities are probably also not going to be within reach.
And go ahead, Doug.
Oh, I was just getting ready to move on to the next
Oh,
one.
okay, let's go.
Yeah, I want to try to give
Yeah.
everybody some time, yeah.
I have a question for Professor Sullivan. I'm like our student faculty. So I wanna ask about the like job finding because I'm in your situation to find an interview in like next semester. So I wanna know that what kind of like specific characters or standard or skills do you expect for students? Because I know you in charge of the ad lab and you also have the experience or background to kind of like the hire like students. So if you want to hire our students, especially for international students, I really like want to know that what's your standards for like what do you expect for students? Yeah.
Wow.
Good question.
Yeah, sure. So the question was when we're looking at resumes for students looking for internships or maybe entry-level job, what skills, qualifications, qualities are we looking for, right? Was that fair?
Yeah.
It's a hard question to answer. I personally don't feel like there's a checklist, right? You know, there might be a little bit more so on the creative side where having a really good portfolio probably is a mandate. If you're going into strategy and accounts, I'm not sure that there's as much of that, you know, mandate. You have to have this or else you won't be considered. I think looking for, you know, the classes that you've taken and talking about, you know, some of the results that you've had in those classes. So if you've done a project in a strategy class where you did a brand audit, you know, on a given brand and then translated that into writing, you know, client strategy, talk about that, right? Put something specific on there, even if it's what you've done in class, not an internship yet, right? If you know, analyzed Pepsi, done a brand audit in Pepsi, and then made a creative recommendation for them, you know, by writing a brief in class, talking about things that are concrete and specific that you've done academically, where you've got some results to show, I think also would be something that I would be interested in. It makes me interested in the way you think, right? That you understand, you know, that results and strategy are important pieces of the puzzle, even if you haven't done that professionally yet. You know, so I would put down some of the work that you're most proud of, but not just talk about what you've done, but the results of what you've done. You know, does that make sense?
So two things to bear in mind too, like, especially for international students, right? We do have, like, you know, it depends on the economic environment, how successful we are with international students getting sponsored in the United States to work. I have a student in my portfolio class who just got a job who's going to be sponsored by an agency. You know, that's great news, but it doesn't happen for everybody. So how do you position yourself so that happens, right? If you're an international student, you've got to be one step above, right? You can't just tie the interview. You have to win the interview, okay? And the way you win it, there's a couple of ways to do it. One is demonstrate ambition on your own, right? We used to, when I was a young creative, we used to go out and find startups and do work for free for them. And they would be like, "You want to give me work for free?" And I'm like, "Yeah." And they would let me do it, right? So I would build my skill set on the outside and demonstrate other work outside of the agency to show my bosses why I deserve better opportunities. So that's one thing you can do. The other thing you can do, the great opportunity here at Boston University as a strategist is make sure that some of your strategy work demonstrates the creative that comes after it. Because the reason is, if you can go into an interview as a strategist or a researcher and say, the reason I'm good, the reason you should hire me is I actually know what the next person is doing. I've done it, and that gives me an empathy to the job they have to do, the ability to give them a positioning statement from which they can work because I've done it. That puts you one step above a lot of research/strategy people who just like to wonk out and then come up with a positioning statement that doesn't actually help the creative economy.
Thank you for the build. That's the point I was trying to make, right? Not working in a silo and saying, well, I wrote this brief. Okay, and then what? You know, and then here's what came from the brief, you know, or I was part of a team project, right? For 217 or 708, you know, and I did the strategy part. And here's the end result, you know, here's the creative that came out of the project so that they can see that you're already building results. You know, those are considered results, even if they're not used in a professional setting. They can see that you're doing it here. That will translate into doing it there. And then working together, piece that Doug mentioned, you know, being part of a team and delivering what the rest of your team needs is extremely important.
To your point, is pro bono this Friday night? Would that be an
It is,
opportunity
yeah,
for
that's a really
students
good one.
to
Yeah,
Get involved.
yes,
You guys know with pro bono.
yes.
This Friday. That's enough. That's.
Yeah,
I
it's
just thought of
a
that.
really
That's
good one. I've been mentioning it in my classes because it's an opportunity with PR Lab. They have nonprofit clients that they come in and tackle, you know, in a very quick turnaround time, just this weekend, to deliver campaigns from beginning to end for them very quickly. So if you don't have the time, you know, necessarily to have an internship, you could still have a campaign to show in just, you know, 24 hours.
And then we'll circle back. Okay, good. I want to make sure. we didn't- Okay.
I have a specific question for job applying. So when I apply for a job, they will ask for my resume, but also ask for my LinkedIn page. So I'm wondering, what are the difference? What are you looking for from my LinkedIn page?
It's an interesting one. I mean, I haven't heard that as much, that employers are also asking for the LinkedIn page. I've heard that they're finding people there for sure, right? But not somebody that you're already engaged with who has your resume also wants your LinkedIn. So that's interesting. LinkedIn is extremely important because recruiters are searching for you right there. I think showing, what you're sharing, right? If you're sharing articles, if you're sharing work that has inspired you, who you're connected to, maybe you're making smart, insightful, humorous comments on other people's posts, right? To look that you're sort of an engaged person with a point of view by commenting on what other people are posting on LinkedIn and by what you're posting directly is probably what they're looking for. Other than that, I think mostly they can get what they need off of your resume.
But LinkedIn is a storefront, right? It's visual. I can see who you are.
Right.
I can see how you represent yourself. It's a strong reflection of your resume. Anytime we're in the hiring business, I'm stalking their LinkedIn pages.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
your resume says one thing, but LinkedIn is more personal. And so therefore what, Michelle was tipping at it, which is, what are you commenting on? What are you interested in? I've gone on to students' LinkedIn pages. There's not even a contact email on it. So when I hit like the contact, I look, there's no email, there's no website there. It looks like they set it up and they never did anything. So you don't want it to look like a house that you don't visit.
I just
You know?
looked at one yesterday
Yeah.
and it said this student hasn't posted in a while, right?
Yeah.
And that is a bad thing. Here's a great point.
But it doesn't have to be your Snapchat feed
Right.
either.
Right.
It doesn't. That's not what it is.
Correct.
I go on it because it gives me notifications. I've shut it off on my phone. I couldn't take it anymore. But it gives me notifications on my browser and I'm like, okay, fine. And I'll go look, but I'll find interesting things. I'll comment on things. Follow agencies that you're interested in. That's always a good thing to do. It's like, or people, business leaders, like if you like, I'm a fan of Mark Cuban. He's started this cost plus drugs business. I don't know if you know anything about this, but it's changing the cost of medication in the United States. It's fascinating to watch. You can say what you want about Mark Cuban, if you find him irascible or tough to listen to, but this little business that he's running is brilliant. And I'm like, okay, I'm interested in this guy. Like, it doesn't have to be, in other words, you don't have to put like the top 10 agencies in the country on it because you feel like you should. But what you should follow is what interests you there.
Yeah.
Yeah, I would agree. I mean, I think earlier we talked about personal branding, and so LinkedIn is your personal brand statement. So I would put a lot of energy and time towards like the first 2 paragraphs. The rest of it can be borrowed from your resume. There is a lot of similarity, right? You're going to populate the content of your resume into LinkedIn. Just feel like resumes are very formal language and it's like for one purpose, but LinkedIn is your ability to like talk about your personal brand. And I wholeheartedly agree. You should follow people because it'll just enrich you, and you're at comp. So you're reading things and you're exposed to things. There is information for your feed. It doesn't have to be hard, right? You don't have to invent the universe. You already have it right here at your fingertips. You can post it out for everyone else to enjoy.
The resume is what you've done, but LinkedIn probably gets more to what you think about and how you think about it. Yeah.
And nobody's asked this question, but I always feel like it's important to address. It's like, you're you. And we live in a world, we today, where it's so easy to look at everybody else and compare and contrast. And it's a dangerous game to play, right? You're capable of what you're capable of, and your friends are capable of different things. That's always going to be the way that it is. What you have to ask yourself is, who am I? What do I want? What are my limits? Right? And you should live within the capacity for you to have the best life that you possibly can. I determined once my children were born that I was going to stay here where our families were. as a career. That was my limit. I'm gonna be the best creative I can be, but it's only going to be determined by what happens in this 40-mile radius, because I can't go any further than this. So that's my limit, and I'm okay with that, right? So when you look at yourself, never mind that your friend at Questrom has a job lined up a year in advance, right? You don't go to Questrom, and our industry doesn't work that way. So you can't let that create anything inside you that makes you feel like you're a failure or you're less, right? And if you leave here and 2 of your friends get jobs right away and you're still scuffling after 2 months, that's okay. Not everybody gets a job at the same speed. It took me 4 months when I got out of college. And the only reason I got that job is because I played soccer with a kid from high school, and it was his dad who was the vice president of the agency and was my youth group leader in 7th grade. The father was. And I'm not kidding, that's the true story. The reason I know it's the only reason I got the job is I interviewed in June and I didn't get the job. And then I got a call in September and was offered the job because that guy found out I was there and told the creative director to give that kid a job. So I was not good enough. So allow accidents to happen. Don't be too critical of yourself. Put your best foot forward. Like, just ask yourself at the end of the day, am I doing my best? If the answer to that is yes, then everything's okay.
Yeah, and things will not go according to plan. You just have to know that it's like a truth, right? You may land what it sounds like a perfect job and you may really hate it. And then that's like a whole other set of questions. So it's not going to go like I made a plan, it's going to be executed just like I set out. There will be bumps in the road, and that's just part of the career path as well. And you'll navigate it just like you've navigated everything else.
Hello again. I'm just wondering, like, what is your most like interchangeable skill that you've learned throughout your career?
Wow. Sorry, keep thinking.
People skills, understanding a room, knowing who you're talking to, knowing who you can trust and who you can't trust. And then 2 ears, 1 mouth. Always.
I would agree. I mentioned soft skills earlier. I think they're way more important to your ultimate success than your IQ or what you have learned to do, right? You could be a great copywriter, but there's a lot of great copywriters. It's the soft skills, I think, that often make people more successful. I think it's being able to find those right people that you want to connect with through really listening to understand them. That's been a really important one for me. Not thinking about my own agenda, but thinking about, I really want to understand this point of view by listening really deeply. But finding those people that, that were worthy of that, right? The colleagues and the groups that I wanted to be around. Not just saying that, I'm going to, take my first job and like, know that this is the right place for me, because I landed in a place that I never expected to go. I didn't know what brand management was when I graduated from, right? So once I found those people, I realized I'm not the smartest person in this room, right? I really want to listen to what these other people can teach me, what we can teach each other.
And if I can add, I will add from a strategy perspective, there are probably 3 things that make someone, a long trajectory of success in strategy. And one is people handling. And I know we talk a lot about EQ and soft skills, but there's something very specific about being able to understand who is sitting across the table from you. People are so different. They may need information delivered in a certain way. They may have certain pre-biases towards what you're going to say to them. And you have to be able to make that person or that group of people really comfortable and just at ease in your presence. And that is a finesse skill that took time to, and not dictate what you're going to do, because strategy isn't about telling someone what to do. It's influencing and wanting them to do what it is that you're telling them to do, which is much harder. The second thing we actually just talked about in class, which is the ability to see that the table should have more people at it than what your team thinks. So understanding what it is that's going to make the work move forward. So does the technologist needs to be at the table because we're talking about building a thing? Or does the analytics person need to be at the table because we're talking about a media plan? What is a media plan without it? Like, so understanding the languages inside an agency and making the table a larger, a bigger dinner than it was originally. And the third thing I think that makes for a great lifetime career in strategy is just curiosity. Like, I can get fired up about the most mundane stuff, and it
Sure
just,
can.
give me a spreadsheet. I'm like, oh my God, look, numbers or whatever it is, like a topic that would bore other people to death. I could probably find something interesting in it. And that's like a note to self, like you're meant for strategy, because you're supposed to think about all kinds of things that other people find utterly boring. So those are my three things.
Presentation skill is
Yeah.
Just gonna say that.
hugely important too. Unfortunately, the last couple of years with Zoom, it's really rotted on the vine for most of you, because it's hard to give a great presentation over Zoom, but now that you're live and in a room and you're still students, if you're in my class, I am emphasizing all the time, know what you're talking about, stand up in the room, look at people in the eyes, don't read everything off a piece of paper, and then understand what you want people to walk away with. It takes a lot of years to really get good at it. But if you're presenting work from an agency perspective, it's 50% of the win.
Yeah.
You put 3 weeks into the work and then 2 hours into the presentation, and it's a presentation that can kill you.
Because it's not just about presenting, right? It's about persuading. And so it's where their 2 points intersect, right? Because Janna was saying, you have to know what the person that you're trying to convince needs to hear in order to get to this. It's really important to understand that and then be able to make a persuasive argument that's going to be customized to whoever your audience is.
Hey, I'm an undergraduate freshman and my major is advertising, and I'm looking into a minor in business. And right now I'm debating on whether I should take the entrepreneur side or the business management. So I was just wondering if, I guess, introducing the business aspect into my background, if it would help in any way, or would it help at all, or in like a dual degree is more preferable than
Hard question. I'm impressed that you're here as a freshman and already thinking about this. I would say there's no right or wrong way to go. It depends on what you're thinking of doing. If you're thinking of starting maybe a small business of your own, or you want to work with startups, work on small brands, the entrepreneurship could be very useful. The business management side is probably more broadly transferable, or even, I don't know if you can do a concentration in marketing or not. I know a marketing major can do a concentration in advertising. I'm not sure if we can do the same in Questrom, but marketing, as well. So you get a fuller picture of the levers that we can pull to impact the consumer, not just advertising, understanding holistically, right? The whole, persuasion business, not just our lane, but well, should we really be doing paid media, or should we be thinking about, earned media here could be useful as well. I don't think there's a right or wrong answer. Where are you thinking of heading career-wise?
I guess it's too early to say, but right now I'm more interested in like fashion, like food. Yeah.
But always, what makes your heart beat? Like when you take the classes, right? One of the things you should pay attention to is, I'm in a class that all of a sudden I'm excited to go to.
Yeah.
Why is that happening to you? That is something that's speaking to your inner self. When you are excited about a class, is it just the professor? It probably isn't. Sometimes it's the way they deliver information, but you're excited about the information.
Yeah.
So when you're looking at decisions that are like, should I do this or should I do that? I'm like, put your hand on the stove and like, see if you like the way it feels. Like, and if it excites you, then follow what this thing is, right? This is the thing I followed all the time, right? The times I made mistakes was when I
Yeah.
didn't listen to my gut.
Yeah,
You know, your guts are very powerful tools for pushing you to where you belong. So, you know, between those two, if it's possible to be like, go take a marketing class at Questrom as an elective, you know, the one that's most interesting to you, and then ask that professor over there while you're there, like, what do you think of this? But then get another opinion from the other side, but ultimately make the decision that's right for you. You had a question too, right? I want to be cognizant of time. There was another question.
I'm also a first year undergrad and like I'm kind of deciding between media science or advertising and like marketing and Questrom. So I guess if my question is like what sold you the job, like, what made you decide to do that?
My choice of advertising is a very active choice. So I got an MBA and I worked in management consulting because I wasn't ready to commit to a single field, and management consulting allows you to look at many categories and many jobs. And for that, it was great because I realized I hated the entire endeavor. Like I really hated it. So I spent 2 years after getting my MBA working in management consulting, and talk about long hours that really stink. Like I really hated it. And so it required a tremendous amount of soul searching on my part in terms of what I was truly meant to do. And then I chose advertising. And since a minute of what Doug's point, like I walked into my first agency and I was there for 7 years and it just didn't even feel like work. I had the best time. And even though I worked long hours and some of it was utterly crazy, the content mattered to me so much that it didn't feel like work. So to answer your question, how do you know you want to do advertising? It's a hard one to answer. It's so personal to you, right? I thought I wanted to go into management consulting because it was like non-committal. I was afraid of commitment. But in the end, the non-commitment really didn't fit me, right? Once I committed, I really loved it. But I love the creativity. I love that there was a finished product. I love that it's the combination of economics and creativity. The most interesting people work in advertising, a lot of very dull people work in business, you know, just all of that matters. The environment mattered, right? The energy was great. I don't know, right? I mean, it's just a matter of what fits you, and you have to really be honest with yourself.
And for me, I was the kid. I grew up in a house with 1 bathroom and 6 people, and I sought the corners out where I would draw pictures, right? So art was going to be a thing for me. My parents asked my art teacher in 9th grade, they're like, we're afraid he's going to be starving in an attic and cut his ear off. And the art teacher said, well, at the time, he said, if you're worried about him making money, he should go into what was then called commercial art, which is what we would call advertising and art direction today. And so that's how I wound up pointed in that direction. If my parents didn't have that conversation and tell me about it, I wouldn't have headed that way. But what really interested me in it is I grew up in the land of commercial jingles. I can still sing many of the jingles from commercials when I was young that affected me and affected the way I looked at brands. So my ability to stop you in 30 seconds of film and introduce you to characters, make you immediately identify how those characters fit together, right? Make you laugh, make you cry, make the hair stand up on the back of your neck, and attach a brand to it. That's fun when you do it right, but it's really friggin' hard work to get to that point. But I lived for 3 moments, right? The moment when the idea struck, right? This is really good. The moment when we sold it to the client and they understood this is really good. And the moment we finished it and hadn't screwed it up and it came out as good or better than we'd hoped. It does not always work that way. Okay, but those were the 3 moments I lived for. The work was all about having those like little dopamine highs of this. And like, if you're a strategist, if you're a researcher, your research leads you to an aha moment, right? Where you're like, oh, this is what this all adds up to. I was in the room when this creative strategist came up with America Runs on Duncan. It was not an art director or a copywriter's line. It was a strategist. And I was there when it happened. I mean, we can all see how easy it is today, but why didn't it exist before that? It didn't exist because one person needed to do the research and look at it all and say, this is what it adds up to. And he has that moment. So, you know, everything for me comes down to like what lights your lamp. And if it lights your lamp for 5 years and then you hate it, move
Yeah.
on.
It's
Like,
gonna change.
so it's okay to change direction too. You know, I may have done the same thing for a long time, but you know, there's plenty of stories about people who just zigzag their way through life and have tremendous careers.
I think it's hard to tell, just by the classes you're taking, you know, so I would encourage you to maybe try Ad Club, right? And as you go along, if you decide to stay in comm, you know, get into Ad Lab as soon as you can, because that's gonna be the most real world experience you can have. Try to start getting some internships. I know you're trying to decide on direction, but I think the point I'm trying to make is just by taking classes, I mean, Doug's right, what classes, you know, get your heart beating that you're excited to go to. But just by taking classes, you know, you're not going to have as much of a real world experience as you can get, you know, in some of the other things available to you here at BU.
Yeah.
I didn't know I wanted to stay in advertising until I had an internship, you know, very candidly. I started as a journalism major because I thought I wanted to be a storyteller, but then I realized you're not really like creating the story, you're just reporting on things that happen. And I was looking for something more creative, you know, ways to tell stories in a more creative manner and actually influence the way people think. And that led me to advertising. But I didn't know until I was a first semester senior doing an internship that I really felt like this was the right place for me.
And I agree with that. And internships are great, but there's another side to that, right? So Michelle's exactly right. I don't want to say that her position is wrong, but there's another side to it. I couldn't do an internship. I had to work. There is no such thing as taking a job that didn't pay. So I never had an internship. You may be that person, right? If you are that person, that's your story. And it's a damn good story to have. And when you walk into an interview and they say you didn't have an internship, you say, I couldn't afford it. And that makes you something. Don't ever think it doesn't. Okay, so the internships matter, but for some of us, there's no choice. Okay? And turn that into character, because character it is.
You can do an internship for credit. I mean, Doug's absolutely right. You know, so do an internship as part of your coursework if you want to have a part-time job or keep your work-study job going. Or Ad Lab, right? Again, do it for credit and you're going to get that internship, you know, close to internship experience. Yeah, for sure.
For a time, right?
Yeah, we're over time. So thank you guys so much. I mean,
Okay, and you can always find us on email.